Hi, I'm Sarah Fry. Welcome to PaTTANpod. Today, we'll learn about accessible educational materials, or AIM. PaTTAN is the home of the Pennsylvania Department of Education's AIM Center, which produces Braille, large print, and formatted PDF materials for eligible school-age students. Joining us today is Dr. Bateman, a professor at Shippensburg University, where he teaches courses on special education law, assessment, and facilitating inclusion. Dr. Bateman, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. It's nice. Thanks for the opportunity.
So to get into AIM, first, we really need to understand access, the first word in AIM. Can you explain what access is and why it should be prioritized?
Well, everyone should consider this, not just for, as you said, for students. We also have to think about parents. Because what we have to provide is make sure that everyone has the ability to receive and participate in what we're doing, so that each has the opportunity to have the benefit of what others are getting. And we have to think about this when we think about access is I know I said it's not just for kids, is that, and I wish we were having this conversation, but we're sitting here in COVID. Yes, we've had COVID in the past couple of years, but COVID is rearing its head again. And what we're having to rely on parents increasingly is to provide educational materials and assistance for kids at home. And some of these parents have difficulty either reading or accessing the materials. So we have to think about access broadly, not just for the kids, but it's ability for everyone to access the materials, not just for the kids. And so the purpose of this, and everyone should receive a benefit. That's what we're asking for, is everyone receive a benefit. So we want to make sure it's equal across all parts.
So some of our audience might not be familiar with that difference of, I referenced AIM, and if you're reading the transcript or following along with closed captioning on this episode, you might see that AIM, but we also have AEM. Could you tell us a little bit about the difference between AIM with accessible instructional materials versus AIM with accessible educational materials?
Yeah, and states and across the nation are using them interchangeably. So I understand the confusion. Is what you have to think about is the materials broadly used as a part of all the educational materials that are provided by a school district. Everything on their website, all the materials that they pass out, all the information that they have, the information about sports teams, the information they have about lunch menus, the information that they have as a part of everything is what they're doing. That's broadly part of the instructional materials, things like that. Now there's others, we talk broadly about the specific educational materials for the kid. What is the kid actually going to use? Is it going to be a larger PDF? Is it going to be something that's at a higher contrast so that they can access the material? Or is it something where they're going to have something read to them so that they can access the material? There are a variety of things we have to think broadly about both, but you have to think about all the audiences, not just the kids.
So as you mentioned, they can be used interchangeably, getting us back to that goal of equitable access, making sure for not only access, but participation, as you kind of led off at the beginning of our conversation. So, and we talked about everybody, the students, the parents. Is there anyone else, or just, I guess, generally when we think about the school in the community, who's benefiting from AIM?
Well, in special education, I'm sorry.
And I should say, I know that's a little bit of a rhetorical or trick question, but I think you're going to help us really get to the heart of it.
Well, the interesting thing is about this, one of the conversations we've always had in education, or should have more frequently, is a part universal design for learning, or abbreviated UDL. It comes from the field of architecture. And we've kind of adapted that to what we're doing in education. But every single thing we do, we should design so that everyone can have access. And keep that in mind as a part of this. And so that you don't have to then retrofit something later. You do it from the get-go and just keep that as part of your mantra that we're going to do this from the beginning. Everyone's going to have the opportunity to receive a benefit from what we're doing about this. It's not just one, or we don't have any kids who are visually impaired in our school. Well, you may have to think about this. Is you may have some individuals who may have vision problems later in the day because of eye strain. strain, or parents who are going to be reading the materials with the kids or studying with the kids who have eye strains later. There are a variety of things that we need to access as a part of this. Same thing goes with materials for individuals who have hearing loss, is we have to think about the opportunities for websites that read or make sounds. Can individuals with hearing loss actually participate in this? So we have to think about what we can do so all can participate in where we are with this. The reason is we want everyone to have the opportunity to benefit. That's what we're striving for, everyone. And education has this as something that we're pushing, is that everyone's going to benefit from education. Now, does it mean that every single square inch has to be fully accessible? That would be nice if we strive for that, but at least we can strive for alternative ways so people can actually participate with what's going on, so they too receive the benefit. So figure it out somehow.
I think it's interesting that, you just said there's alternative ways, adding an extra way. Bringing back something that you said about universal design, I think we've had a lot of conversations in the past about the relationship between, and I'll even throw another one in here at you, UDL or universal design, accessible educational or accessible instructional materials. And then we can even go a little bit further into that relationship with assistive technology. So I'm wondering if you could, from your perspective, kind of navigate or give us that relationship in a nutshell.
Well, yeah, so thank you. And a lot of people think that when we're actually making accommodations or doing something, it's going to require a computer chip. It doesn't necessarily require computer-assisted technology things in order to actually provide benefit for kids. It may be larger print on something a handout we have, maybe more contrast so an individual can see the letters clearer on the page, or less contrast for individuals who have problems with white backgrounds. There are a variety of things that we have to think about that. When we think about assistive technology, assistive technology takes a wide range. And what we have to think about is that there are some kids assistive technology may be who have sensory issues. It might be something that underneath their desk that they rub for sensory integration as a part of this. Or it may be headphones. My daughter was saying this the other day, is that my daughter works at a school for kids with autism, and they were about to have a fire drill, and she quickly ran back to her class and immediately put headphones on all of her kids because of the sensory needs that they have as a part of this. So sensory issues go across a lot, but assistive technology is a very wide-ranging things. The problem is people often think about assistive technology that it has to have a computer chip. It doesn't. But back to UDL, kind of interchangeably, in UDL, universal design, is things are set up so that everyone can access, that everyone can benefit as part of it. It's a universal design about this. The easiest ones we can think of are architectural accommodations for this, is that water fountains are put at a level so that an individual who uses a wheelchair can wheel up and access this. There's not handles that they have to grip, that they can actually push and use. So there's a lot of things like this. But for educational materials, we have to think about, do we need to make sure that we have higher quality PDFs or accessible PDFs, or there's a variety of things that we need to think about as a part of this. There's a wide range as a part of this, things like this. The one thing that I'm seeing is, and there are states, and I look at a lot of litigation. Some people watch Netflix, I look at litigation. But what we have about this is that within every state across the nation, pretty much, there have been complaints about websites. And websites are not often available for individuals because the font is fixed. There's sounds that are fixed. There's things that don't highlight that should highlight. There's a variety of things. And what we have to think about is 508 standards and making sure that people can access those websites.
So I just want to take a moment and think about that with that example with the websites. If we're designing something universally, and you mentioned kind of as well another example with accessible PDFs. So considering building that in from the start, like you said, that proactive design, that accessible PDF, or making sure that things the functionality in the website is working for users to maybe turn on the contrast or change the font size or actually the text, what it appears as. So that can be done as universal design to really broaden that opportunity. And then it could also lend itself into that that aim with that accessible PDF format. So they do live together.
Absolutely.
Right? And then taking that a step further, that assistive technology, as we think about with just legal definitions, could be any kind of support, but that is specific to a student's need, right?
Yeah, correct.
So I even think about maybe a Venn diagram where there's overlap between UDL and AIM, there's overlap between AIM and AT, and they all kind of work together to, like you said, hopefully broaden opportunity for access, participation, and engagement in the educational community.
Exactly. No, but good web design works across all levels. And individuals who are, well, best example I can give to you is my son during COVID. When he lost his job, as many people did, so he went back to school to do web design. And what he just researched many different programs. And what web designers are learning is that the really good websites are ones that are patterned pretty much like after the AARP, American Association of Retired Persons, because individuals may not have grown up with technology, may have vision problems, may have hearing problems, and so to make it as intuitive as so possible, so right towards the AARP, pay attention to their websites. So all his website design, he was doing it for kids who are 20, 21 years of age, who have clearly grown up for technology, but the accessibility aspects that he was putting in were all based on those kinds of standards. So good web design cuts across all these levels, and we have to think about this because you don't know who's going to click on your website. You don't know when they're going to need these kinds of things. And I really hope we don't have to go to another shutdown of schools. But when we think about this, is the parents were having to navigate things, and we are having them to rely on using computers. I mean, we used Zoom heavily. 3 years ago, most of us didn't know what Zoom was or Google Hangout. We knew what FaceTime was because we had kids, but we didn't have an understanding of this. But now parents are having to learn these, have learned these things. We have to make sure that they can use these effectively.
And it's just to, I guess, put on a good exclamation point onto the end of that thought is you said so from the beginning of our conversation is that you may not always anticipate, or you can't anticipate anyone's needs. So whether a student enters the school year with a labeled or identified disability or not, we're humans, right? There may be a development, or you may be serving a family where it's not documented. The family's not calling and telling you, hey, can you change this because I can't look at it the way that it's presented. So expecting or planning for the unexpected, broadening that reach is important.
Actually, and building it from the get-go, because you don't know. I wish. I'll take this bet with superintendents. Can they guarantee me that no kid will need accessible information during the course of the year? They may not have it now, but can they absolutely guarantee that's going to happen during the year? No. Kids do things. Kids are involved in things, and many of these kids have disabilities at no fault of their own. And what we have to think about is making it so that they can receive the benefit of education that everyone else gets. And that's what we think about this, because they're leading a life that they probably did not design or did not want. And we don't need to make it any harder for them.
So I hope that we've circled around this a lot, and I hope the why is absolutely clear now. For our school administrators that are and our educators who are watching or listening to this episode and are inspired to do more, what are some practical get started now tips or advice you would give to educators and administrators?
Oh yes, very, very easily. Is pay attention to AIM guidelines and make sure that they look at this and they start running their websites through the different protocols that exist out there. There's not one standard protocol, but there's a variety of protocols. And for most notably for special education, is that the Office of Special Education Programs in Washington, as part of the U.S. Department of Education, has periodically put out what are called Dear Colleague letters, guidance to the fields, often abbreviated as DCL, but guidance to the field about various things that they need to do to clarify what's going on. So make sure that their websites are accessible, go through this, but also make sure from right now, henceforth, everything is accessible. Yes, you may have some legacy things that you need to change, but make sure that everything that you have is built into this, and that you don't unfairly prevent people from participating, because we want everyone to get a benefit. We want everyone to participate.
So not just the website, but educators could be maybe planning for their upcoming lessons or their units, and with that in mind, considering what might need to be converted into an accessible PDF, or taking those guidelines into mind with selecting a more accessible font,
Yeah.
a face type, right?
Yep. Not only accessible font, and there are some things that are already built into, for instance, Microsoft Word has some conversion things that they can do as a part of this. But looking at make sure you address the kids' needs, because we don't want kids to be suffering, and we don't want kids to be going or have to receive extra services when we could just provide easy modifications for them. And for the parents too, making sure that we provide the accessible modifications so that they can all participate. Yes, from the get-go, do this. But keep this as something that's a part of everything. So what I recommend is that you make sure that your web designers or the people monitoring your web pages pay attention to AIM guidelines and pay attention to this and address this, and then make sure that when people are publishing the websites and the websites that you link to, not just your websites, but if you have something that is part of the instruction that you're providing and you link to a website, make sure it's also accessible and kind of build from there.
Something that I don't think we've really addressed, and maybe it's obvious, but for me, I think I want to hear it out loud again, is we keep saying we want to make sure that everybody has equal opportunity, equal access. But if that isn't from the get-go, as you've said, if that isn't a consideration, that does create issues, right? That might slow down that participation. It might prevent them from participating altogether.
Yeah, not only participating, but also treat them as second-class citizens. Mm-hmm. And what we want is individuals to have the full opportunity to move forward with their peers at the same rate as their peers, and have the parents also be able to move along and participate with their kids. We don't want to create a second-class setting. And we don't want to unfairly punish, as I said a few minutes ago. No, we don't want to unfairly punish these individuals. We want to think about this. Now, some of these materials, we may have someone who may read some of the materials. Districts were having to do this during COVID, where kids were unable to read things. So districts would get on the line and they would actually read things with the kids so that they could clearly participate. If you don't have something that's completely accessible, figure out ways so that kids can get access. But ask the people what they can do, what can be the best about this, as opposed to just assuming that you know better. Ask what works for them. Because there are some kids who may have severe vision problems, but reading might be the best way of doing things. It might be large print, or they might be considered visually impaired because of a field of vision issues, as opposed to just an acuity issue. So there's a variety of things out there we need to pay attention to. There's other kids who, because of eye strain, that towards the end of the day they've been concentrating so hard that they have trouble concentrating and paying attention at the end of the day because they've been spending all their mental energy focusing on what's going on, and they have a headache. So we have to really think about when do we provide this material, what do we do with them, and just pay attention to how we help them move forward.
I really like that. Just to kind of sum up, from the get-go, like we've talked about, be very proactive with it. Seek out support from the guidelines and references that you've mentioned. Engage those who you are designing for, yes. Right? Yeah. Not making assumptions, but at the heart of everything, pun intended, aiming for that access.
Well, and also, yeah, and one other thing, and I can build on what you say, is each individual who has a disability needs to be treated as an individual, and going to them, asking what works for them. Because once you've seen one individual with a visual impairment, you've seen one individual with a visual impairment. No pun intended on that one. But what you have to think about is they may access the material very differently than another. An individual with a hearing impairment may access the material very differently from another individual. What works for them, find out what works for them, run with that and work, and continue to ask if that continues to work for them and if they're successful. Don't just assume that one conversation is going to solve everything. Check with them periodically and learn from them. But also learn that they different kids will have different needs, and understand this.
So there isn't a one-size-fits-all. We know that in education, right. Particularly in special education. Yes. Everything is an iterative approach, yes. to finding solutions, but hopefully finding solutions early and not having to retrofit or backtrack and delay, yes. access and participation. Dr. Bateman, it has been truly an honor and a pleasure to have this conversation with you. I'd also like to remind our audience that more information about AIM and PDE's AIM Center is available in the show notes. It's linked to the PaTTAN website. I'd also like to thank John Ragsdale for producing this episode. And ultimately, I hope that everyone will come back and visit us again on PaTTANpod. Seek out another episode to watch or listen. Thank you.